clear as day, we hear this.
Get out of here.
And I looked at Jamie and she looked at me. We both beeline down the stairs. I think I missed the last 6 steps, busted the door open, and we were gone.
Have you ever had anyone request something funny for their funeral?
Yes. A lot of people actually don't know exactly what happens to their loved one when they die. I want to know everything. Did you see the bright light?
Yeah.
Did you see mom and dad? Did you see Daisy, our pet dog?
Sure.
What happened
What was
during
it
that
like?
9 minutes? And she said,
Hey everyone, welcome to the Jobcast with Christian Amaral, where each week I talk to the most interesting people I know about their life and career. My goal is that you walk away from each episode with some insight and inspiration for your own path in life. My guest today is somebody who has spent his entire career surrounded by something that most of us try not to think about: death. He has spent his career as a mortician and a funeral director, and I'm so excited to talk to him today. Please welcome my guest, Morty Sten. Morty, thank you so much for coming on.
thanks, Christian. Good to see you, and thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to dive into this. You have had such a fascinating career, and I think lived so many different lives. And we'll talk about what you now do in retirement now that you've sold your business.
Okay.
But unfortunately, I have to start with the difficult question. What happens when we die? Literally. What literally happens when somebody dies? That's a process that I don't know much about. All I know is I've been to a couple family funerals. I know that we then migrate from the funeral home to the gravesite. But what's going on behind the scenes?
That's a good question, and a lot of people actually don't know exactly what happens to their loved one when they die.
Yeah.
Sometimes they die unexpectedly. They're not under a doctor's care. They're normally healthy, and then all of a sudden they pass away. In that case, they become a coroner's case. So they go to the coroner's office. Coroner does an investigation, autopsy, blood work to determine the cause of death, so they can determine exactly how somebody died. If there was any foul play or not, they rule all that out.
Wow. So the coroner, again, it's something that I feel like we all should know more about because it's something that we all eventually have to deal with. That's a government department that specifically deals with folks passing away. Is that fair to say?
Here in Sacramento, it's the county.
Okay.
And so each county has either a coroner or a medical examiner.
Got it.
A coroner is a person that's appointed in that position. A medical examiner is elected to that position.
Okay, so that's where the journey starts. What happens after that?
So if they were in hospice, somebody passes away at home, they're under a doctor's care, they know it's coming, they've been treated for some kind of illness. The first phone call that you make is to the hospice. So hospice will come to the home. They'll make sure that the person has actually passed away, time of death, official time of death, and then they'll call the funeral home. Funeral home will come and pick up your loved one and bring him into their care.
Understood. Got it. So at that point, the dead body is now your responsibility to get them ready for a funeral or cremation, I assume?
Correct. When we come to the home, we talk to the family and explain exactly how we are going to remove their loved one from the home. And explain everything that we're going to do. They can either stay in the room with us or they can leave while we do this. But once we leave and place their loved one in our vehicle, that person is now our responsibility.
And I imagine you, from that point on, you're really the point of contact that is working with that family to kind of guide them through the most difficult time in their life.
Exactly. We are. We set up an appointment, have the family come to the funeral home, determine type of service that they're going to want.
Yeah.
Cremation or burial, any kind of funeral service, celebration of life. We plan everything A to Z.
Fascinating. Okay, well, we're going to come back to the business of being a funeral director and being a mortician, but I want to get to know you a little bit more as well.
Sure.
Can you think of, when you think back on your childhood, are there any defining memories or defining moments that you can connect to that sort of inform the path you took in life or the person that you've kind of become?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
I remember the day and the instance that it happened
Really?
because I wanted to do this since I was 7 years old.
You're joking.
I kid you not, Christian. 7 years old. So this is what happened. And I'll
Wow.
tell you the story here.
Yes, please.
So my dad was actually a physician.
Got it.
He graduated from medical school, and then he came to Sacramento in the early 50s, and he became the county, or the director for the county hospital.
Got it.
So back then in the early 50s, the county hospital was a 2-room emergency room behind the police department. So he worked with all the police officers and detectives. Since he was part of the police department, he had a gun and a badge and was sworn in.
Interesting.
And so he knew everybody, and everybody knew my dad.
Yeah.
Everybody knew him. So one day he got a phone call from a neighbor who was a police detective, and he'd called my dad and said that he had just shot and killed his wife, and he was going to kill himself.
Oh my gosh.
So my dad ran down the street and went to his house, and sure enough, that's exactly what he did.
Wow.
So I didn't know any of this
Oh my
till
gosh.
like 3 days later.
Yeah.
So I'm down the street playing with my friends, and I look down the street. My mom and dad are getting in the car. They come this way down the street to me, and they get me, and they say, "Come in the car. I want you to go with us."
Mhm.
So as we're driving, they explained what had happened. They told me the story I just told you. So when we got to the funeral home, which was here in Sacramento, the funeral director, met us at the door and walked us down this hallway, and they opened this room, and at the back of the room was a casket with the lid open.
Mm-hmm.
So I walked in and I looked down, and it was the detective, which I knew because he was a neighbor.
Yeah.
But I kept thinking of what my dad told me that this guy did,
Mm-hmm.
this horrible thing
Yeah.
that he did to himself and his wife.
Right.
But I'm looking down, and he looked calm and peaceful. It looked like he was taking a nap.
Yeah.
You couldn't see any of the damage that he had done.
Sure.
And so I would just thought, this is kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
That they made this guy look, calm and peaceful,
Yeah.
even though he did this awful, awful thing. And so when we're driving home, I was actually kind of quiet, and my mom turned around and said, "You're quiet. Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I just thought that was actually fascinating what I just saw."
Yeah.
Because they made this horrible experience, to this guy, what this guy did, but he made him look human again.
Interesting.
Human again. And I was
Yeah.
like, they did that for our benefit.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's what I want to do.
First of all, what an intro to, the concept of death. I'm sure that wasn't the first time you had been exposed or thought of the idea of somebody dying, but probably the first time you were face to face with it, right?
First time I was face to face with it.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot about it from my dad.
Yeah.
My dad being a doctor, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and he'd be on the phone, and he was always gone, going to the hospital, making rounds and seeing patients
Yeah.
and stuff. And I just knew that just wasn't for me.
Wasn't your path.
Wasn't for
Yeah.
me. But I did try to dabble a little bit,
Mhm.
in the medical field because I was exposed to it.
Sure.
And I became a paramedic for a few years.
Wow.
But that was my first time dealing with death and actually seeing it, face to face.
Yeah, and you made that connection of, okay, this is somebody here did something to help other people.
Exactly.
In this
yes.
horrible tragedy, amidst all this sadness and pain and confusion, there's somebody there whose job it is to make the deceased person look a little bit more human, to bring some comfort to the families.
Right.
And that stuck with you.
Right. Because part of me thought, if I walk, what am I going to see?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Is he just gonna? Did they just like pick him up and put him in a casket, and he's gonna be all like that?
Yeah.
I had no idea, but when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay,
Wow.
this is okay. I can see this.
And so from that moment on, that was that was what you were interested in.
Yeah, and being a kid, I obviously wanted to be an astronaut and a baseball player
Of
and,
course.
and all those things too. But as I got older and kind of started thinking about, what am I really going to do for the rest of my life?
Yeah.
And it always brought me back, I want to help people. I want to be part of people's lives. And I always thought about that story of how it impacted me. And it's like, this is something that I really want to do.
Was there any adjustment period as you started working more closely with the dead bodies? Was there any period where you had to kind of get comfortable with that, or right away was it kind of just a body's a body? It's
I was
no
a
big deal.
natural,
Yeah.
and being young, a body is a body. Yeah, they died. So what? I have a job to do.
Sure.
I've seen it. I saw
Just
blood
another
and
day of
gore
work.
and mayhem at the ambulance company.
Yeah.
And this was different.
Yeah.
But honestly, working for the coroner's office was a real eye opener. We saw some stuff that would make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, and I could tell you stories that would make you puke. I mean,
Wow.
we really saw the horrible, rotten side of people.
How was your mental health in those first couple of months when you started to really have to process some of the heavier deaths that you were
The weirdest thing is, Christian, it didn't phase me.
really?
Yeah. It didn't really phase me. When it really started phasing me was in the last couple of years.
Really? Recently?
Recently.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you think changed?
I don't know. I think maybe because I got older and I've been doing it so long, and you just get so emotionally attached to the families and stuff.
Yeah.
And it got to the point to where over the last couple of years before I ended up selling the funeral home, it's like, nothing phased me. But
Sure.
now they're starting to phase me.
Got it.
I was starting to think about things, and things that I saw, when I was younger, was like, that's nothing. And I'd
Right.
see things now, and it's like, it would really bother me for days.
I-
And it got
yeah.
to the point to where it's like, I've been doing this for 35 plus years.
Yeah.
It's time to go.
I can't imagine doing a job where you, in order to really be effective and in order to really be there for people, you kind of have to detach a little bit, right?
You do. You don't want to get emotionally attached
Yeah.
especially to the families. You want to be sympathetic and you want to be empathetic because we have a job to do. We're trying to help them get through the worst day of their lives, but you can't really get attached to them because you're gonna burn out, and it's not gonna end well. Especially if you get so caught up, in the moments with these families, it'll just burn you out really fast.
Have you found that your own perspective on death has evolved from when you first got into the business until now?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
I am not afraid. I used to be terrified
Sure.
of dying. I mean, everybody is, right?
Yeah.
I used to be terrified of dying and passing away. Not anymore.
And
Not anymore.
Can you pinpoint a specific moment where that changed for you?
Yeah. And it was kind of just recently.
Really?
So my older sister passed away.
Yeah.
And ironically, she was the last case that we had when I sold my funeral home. So
Wow. Was that just a coincidence?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So I'd
How
sold the funeral home.
fascinating.
It was in escrow, and she
Wow.
passed away a couple of days before
Got it.
the sale took over. So once everything was
Yeah.
done, so she was my last case that went through the funeral home for me. But she had surgery. She had this heart murmur. And she had the surgery where they replaced a valve in her heart. And so
Yeah.
she was in the hospital and in rehab. And they're having her do these exercises in bed while she's sitting on the edge of the bed. And then they're going to have her stand up
Sure.
and then do some more exercises just to kind of get the blood moving and stuff. So she's sitting on the edge of the bed and she's doing her exercises. And they said, okay, we need you to stand up. And she goes, you know what? I just need to sit here for just a minute because I really don't feel that good. And they said, what's going on? She goes, I don't know what's going on, but something's happening. And she passed out and went into full cardiac arrest. So they did they did CPR. They called the code because it was in the hospital.
Yeah.
All the doctors and the teams come in.
So she was already in the hospital
She was already in the hospital.
about to do the physical therapy.
Right. And so they did CPR for like 9 minutes. So she was dead for like 9 minutes.
Yeah.
And the weirdest thing is this happened like at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And at like 8:30 that night, I'm talking to her on the phone
Yeah.
because they brought her back and you
Wow.
know.
So she was revived.
So she was revived
Wow.
and talking to me 10 hours later
Incredible.
on the phone. And so, you know, my niece called and told me what had happened. And I called, for some reason, I just picked up the phone and just wanted to call her. So
Wow.
I'm talking to her and stuff.
Wow.
And I said, I'm going to come see you tomorrow. And so she goes, great, I'd love to see you. So the next day, I go to the hospital to see her. And she goes, how are you? And I went, I want to know everything. Did you see the bright light? You know,
Yeah.
did you see mom and dad? Did you see Daisy, our pet dog?
Sure.
What happened
What was
during
it
that
like?
9 minutes? And she said, sorry to disappoint you. I don't remember a thing. But she goes, well, I will tell you this. The only thing that I do remember, I didn't see a light and I didn't see any people or anything. But I will tell you, it was the most calm, peaceful, relaxing experience I've ever had.
Wow.
She goes, so if I don't make it out of here, I'm okay. And that's when I came to grips with it, you know? Maybe because you hear stories about people
yeah.
that come back and they see relatives and
Sure.
and you hear, you know, these things like on TikTok with the mediums that
Yeah.
talk about what's the afterlife like and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So I'm talking with my sister, I'm kind of a believer now. I think you know, I don't know what's going to happen, you know, when I go, but, you know, I'm not afraid anymore.
Yeah.
Knowing that there's something, even if I don't see mom and dad or my dogs or my friends or anything like that, or my other sisters that have passed away, at least I know it's going to be peaceful.
Sure. There's not, and I've heard a lot of those. It's so funny how the TikTok algorithm or, you know, the YouTube algorithm will push things towards you. I've heard a lot of those near-death experiences, and it does seem like, you know, there's a lot of different perspectives and religions and different, you know, things that people experience. But the through line seems to be no one comes back with bad news. There's no one ever comes back and is like, ooh, boy, that sucked. Like everyone's like, that was perfect. It was peaceful, or it was joyful, or I felt like I was home, or I love that. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, nobody's ever said, "Oh, it was terrifying. I was scared. It was you know, brimstone and fire." You know, you just don't hear those.
Yeah,
it's just always hear the calm, peaceful experience that they have, and that's reassuring.
Have you ever had anyone request something funny for their funeral?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Can you tell that story?
Okay, got a couple of them for you.
Yeah.
First one that comes to mind: a lady had passed away. Kids came in to make funeral arrangements, and they wanted to choose a cremation. And I kind of explained the process. And then after the cremation process, we take the cremated remains and we place them in the urn that you choose. And we need to select an urn to put your loved one's remains in. And they said, okay. So I showed them all the different urn options, and they picked one that they really liked. And they said, can you engrave on it? And I go, you can't. The way this one's made is kind of like a glass one. You can't really engrave it. You need something like wood or metal. And they go, well, show me the metal one. So we picked a metal one, and they were just really adamant about the engraving. So I said, this will be perfect for you. And they go, we like this. You know, it's mom's colors. Everything's going to work out. And I said, okay, great. So what we need to do is we need to talk about the engraving. Traditionally, people put their full name, date of birth, date of passing, something like that. And they go, oh, no. We already know what we're going to have placed on her urn that we want engraved. I went, great. So I'm getting ready to write. And I go, okay, what do you want engraved? And they said, we wanted it to say, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, you were alive, now you're toast.
That's so funny. I love that. Ultimately, you know, the person who passed away, they're not in pain anymore. Why not celebrate? Why not have fun with it?
For sure.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of families you just love working with.
I bet.
That, you know, they, of course they miss their loved one, but, you know, it's a long time coming. They knew it was coming. They come to terms with it, and they're okay with it.
Absolutely. I was looking through your social media, and I saw that at some point you and the funeral company had done a Before I Die wall. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
What
Yes.
What was the inspiration for that? And can you talk about that a little
Okay, so the Before I Die wall started by this lady who was an artist in New Orleans. And so what happened was when Katrina hit, and wiped out New Orleans. What she did is she went to this ward, I think it was Ward 9 or something like that got totally wiped out. And she found this abandoned house. And so what she did is she started painting the house, and she painted it all black. And then she wrote on there, "Before I die, I will." And then she made lines.
Yeah.
And she left paintbrushes and paint. So people can come and they can kind of fill in.
Oh, that's so cool.
You know, "Before I die, I will." And then you can, it's kind of like a public bucket list.
Sure, yeah.
And so apparently people got wind of it and started making their own "Before I Die" walls.
Yeah.
And I was reading it, and I saw the news story on it, and I read the magazine articles, and eventually there was a book called the "Before I Die" book, which they show. It's just like a coffee table book, and it's just photos of everybody's "Before I Die" walls.
Wow.
From all over the world.
That's so powerful.
So at our funeral home, me and the lady that wrote all of our pre-arrangements for us came up with the idea, because we did a lot of senior home shows and the Auburn Home Show. So we did a lot of community events. And so what we did is her husband was a contractor, and he built us a "Before I Die" wall.
That's so cool.
So we would take it to like the Auburn Home Show, the Sacramento Home Show.
Yeah.
There was in Auburn, where our funeral home was. There was on the last Friday in the month during the summer, they had a car show where they blocked up streets.
Wow.
We had it on one of the corners, and the news channels came out and saw it and did a story on us. It was actually really cool.
That's so
It
great.
was really cool.
What do you want to do before you die? What's on your list?
I have a long bucket list, Christian, but I do, but I'll tell you, number one on the bucket list: play golf at St. Andrews.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. And St. Andrews is located where?
In Scotland.
In Scotland.
Yeah, St. Andrews is the home of golf.
Got it. That's the OG. That's where it started.
That's right. That's kind of like our Mecca.
Got it.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you, going back to your career a little bit, there was a moment where you made the leap from being employed to owning your own business.
Correct.
Can you talk about that transition and how you came to that decision that, you know what, I'm going to do this for myself?
Okay. So it happened in 2008. The real estate market crashed and the economy tanked.
Yeah.
People lost their jobs. People lost their homes. Real estate market was upside down. Everything was just gone.
Sure. Yeah.
Gone. People, everybody got laid off, and people lost their jobs. And because of the market and people losing their jobs and their homes and stuff, people didn't really have money for traditional funerals anymore.
Oh, interesting.
For burials and having like the visitation and the traditional funeral and the burial at the cemetery, because people just didn't have the money to do it. They wanted the best for mom and dad or grandpa or whatever, but they just didn't have the means to do it. So everybody was going towards cremation. So that was one of the reasons about the rise of the cremation rate, because it was more eco-friendly, and it was considerably more affordable.
I bet.
So a lot of people were going to that. So even with our industry, people used to always say, "Oh, you're in a recession proof." No. No. So there was people like me who were licensed funeral directors and licensed embalmers. They didn't really need us anymore. They couldn't afford to pay us.
Yeah.
So what they would do is all the people that were like duly licensed, that had both the licenses, they let us go.
Got it.
And so they just kind of ran under kind of like a small crew, and hired fresh mortuary graduates for minimum wage.
Got it.
So I was unemployed, out of a job for a year and a half.
Wow. At what point did you start thinking, I think I could do this?
So here's the turning point. I was collecting unemployment. I was trying to find a job.
Yep.
Nothing. Nobody was hiring. So I was actually looking for jobs outside of this industry.
Yeah.
Doing anything. My wife heard from a friend of hers that they had a career coaching seminar at Bayside Church. I went to that, and it was like 3 nights or 3 weekends in a row. The first one was a real eye-opener. And I was telling them, yeah, I've been doing this mortuary stuff all my life, don't really have any other skills. And they said, okay, well, what do you do? Tell me about your day. So I'm telling them everything that I do during the day. The lady goes, okay, well, you have customer service experience,
Sure.
you got typing experience, problem solving. She's listed all these things, these skills that I have.
Yeah.
Then the last day, I was talking to somebody. He says, how's it going? And I said, I'm still not getting anything. And he goes, yeah, some people kind of start their own thing, if you can't beat them, join them, as they say.
Sure.
And I go, I can't join them if they're not going to hire me.
Yeah.
And this guy walks by and he overheard it. He just kind of leans in and he goes, if you can't beat them, join them. If you can't join them, compete against them. And the light bulb went off.
Wow.
And I went, oh my goodness, maybe that means I should just start my own.
And before that moment, you had not even considered starting your own
I
business.
never considered or even had an inkling of starting my own funeral home.
Wow.
So I got home and I researched it a little bit and went on the cemetery and funeral board's website to see what the licensing requirements were, and I qualified for all that.
Wow.
And I talked to, because I knew everybody in the funeral industry, so I talked to a lot of people and said, hey, this is something I'm thinking about doing. Cashed in my savings, cashed in some 401ks.
Sure.
And got as much money as I could, and I ended up I'm starting my own. We ended up getting office space in Auburn.
Yeah.
Just a small little office. And
So you didn't have a funeral home at that point. You just had an office.
I just had office space, which you didn't really have to have a big traditional funeral home with a chapel and all that. I knew somebody that owned a funeral home that had a chapel, a prep room, and a crematory. So they were gracious enough to let us contract with them. So they did all of our cremations for us. We got to rent the prep room if we needed to do any kind of embalming, restorations, anything like that. We were able to use their prep room.
Yeah.
So it took a village, but we were able to do it. And so we just had office space where we had a selection room where people can come in and they can make funeral arrangements, pick out merchandise. We just didn't keep their loved ones there on site.
What an innovative way to start a business. I mean, in my mind, if I'm like, I want to start a funeral home, you might think that you have to go find a place where you can host funerals and with the crematorium and stuff. You found a way to really contract a lot of that stuff out.
We did. And the building that we had, that we rented space in, down at the end of the hall, they had a banquet room and there was a restaurant there.
Yeah.
So we were able to set up having celebration of life services, funeral services in the banquet room, and catered luncheons.
Wow.
So it was kind of a full service. So we were trying to do
That's so
things,
cool.
try to keep things traditional, but also trying to move forward tech-wise.
Sure. And how long did it take you from taking that leap of faith and cashing in the accounts and saying, I'm going to really go for this? How many months, how many years did it take before you were able to look around and go, all right, I think we're okay. Like we built something that I think is sustainable and is producing income. Because to me, that sounds terrifying, starting your own business, no matter how much experience you have.
It took a couple of months for the licensing, the inspections and everything to get up and running. So once we got up and running and got our licensing, we started the advertising. And I think we got our first case about 2.5, 3 weeks after we had opened. We did one in November, 2 in December, and then in January we did like 5. And so it started kind of gradually picking up. And so I'm going to say, to answer your question, probably about 4 or 5 months in, I thought, okay, this is working out. This could work.
That's incredible.
This could work.
That's really fast for any small business. To take it in a completely different direction as we wrap up here, any supernatural experiences that you ever had while working with a dead body or while, just doing your day-to-day?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Multiple?
There's been a couple instances.
But they really stuck with you.
Oh, yeah.
Can you share any of them?
Sure. I used to work at a funeral home not too far from here called Sacramento Memorial Lawn.
Yeah.
So when I worked there, it was a corporately owned funeral home. But when I did body transports, it was owned by a gentleman named Morris Daggett and his family. Morris Daggett passed away from natural causes in that funeral home, and his wife died of natural causes in that funeral home.
Wow.
While I worked there, I had a boss that died at work at that funeral home.
Oh my gosh.
And so, yeah.
Wow.
So, and everybody, when I got hired there, they told me, they go, "Oh, just watch yourself, because this place is really haunted.
Got it.
Really haunted." So where the chapel is, there's upstairs. There's a loft where you can kind of go up, like a balcony where you can go and you can overlook the chapel down there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one day, our boss was directing a funeral, and so me and another coworker went up to the loft to watch her direct the funeral. And the way that you get up to the loft, Christian, is you open this creaky door.
Yeah.
You go up these creaky stairs to this loft that's like made of plywood. It's an old.
That sounds terrifying, even if it wasn't in a funeral.
I know. And and so the chairs are sitting there. It's like if you and I are sitting there, and if somebody opened the door downstairs, you'd hear it.
Yeah.
If somebody came up the stairs, you'd hear him. So you would know if somebody's coming up. So we're up there, and it's quiet, and we're sitting there watching her direct the funeral, and clear as day, we hear this.
Get out of here.
And I looked at Jamie, and she looked at me. Both of our faces, the blood just drained out
And
of
it was
our
like
faces.
loud, like a loud.
It was like they were yelling at us. Like they were yelling at us.
Did you recognize the voice?
No. It was a man's voice, very deep, very angry.
Yeah.
We just looked at each other. The blood was out of our face. We were both white. We both beelined down the stairs. I think I missed the last 6 steps, busted the door open, and we were gone.
Oh my gosh.
It was the scariest thing.
Did you ever go back up in that room?
No.
Yeah.
There's no way I was going to go
I
back
bet.
up there.
Wow. So to wrap this up, can you tell us a little bit about your transition after selling the funeral home? You spoke a lot about kind of the reasons for that transition, and the really beautiful moment where you get to, your sister is the last person that you work with. First of all, so touching. I literally, like, that makes me want to tear up thinking about it. What have you been doing with your life since then?
Since I sold the funeral home, I've been doing a lot of stand-up. As you know, I do stand-up, so
Yeah.
I'm doing that full-time.
Wow.
I'm just kind of traveling and just kind of spending time with my family and just doing things that that I've wanted to do, that working and running a business has kind of prevented me from doing. I want to cook more,
Yeah.
and so I've been doing some projects around the house. But primarily, since I sold the funeral home, I've just been kind of diving headfirst into stand-up.
And are there any lessons that you've learned from your life, your career, and now in retirement that, if somebody is younger and is really trying to find their own path in life, is there any advice that you might be able to give them?
Just go for it. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
People are going to tell you no, you shouldn't do it. People are going to try and talk you out of it. If it's something that you're passionate about, don't let anybody say no. Just do it. Just go and do it.
I love that. That's so true. That's so powerful. Morty, thank you so much for being on the show. It's so great to have you, and thanks for coming on.
It's great to be here. Thank you again, Christian.